And that is the great challenge that the FBI and Homeland has, is to try to, monitor to the extent you can these communications.
We are imploring Congress to help us seek legal remedies towards that, as well as asking the companies to provide technological solutions to help that.
That last person you heard from was Michael Steinbach. He's one of the top FBI counterterrorism guys, and he's telling Congress the Bureau needs more surveillance tools to track terrorists. Steinbach is particularly concerned with encrypted messages that they are sending to one another, and he's asking Congress to give law enforcement more access to these communications. Now, of course, this doesn't come in a vacuum, just days after Congress extended parts of the Patriot Act, but scaling back some of the NSA's other powers. Critics are saying the U.S. spy agencies still have too much power and are still way too invasive. This all happening on the same week, as you know, that police killed a terror suspect in Boston. They say Osama Rahim was plotting to kill police officers. Police confronted him in a CVS parking lot, shot him after he showed a huge military knife. The FBI had been keeping an eye on Rahim for years. He was also under 24-hour surveillance since he bought 3 knives on Amazon last year. Rahim's nephew David, or Dawood, Wright, is now under arrest and facing federal conspiracy charges. FBI saying Wright and his uncle were caught on tape talking about beheading cops. Okay, so we have, TJ, two conflicting messages at the same time. Yeah. We have even certain Republicans on the Libertarian side, most notably Mr. Paul, saying privacy is the bedrock of what this country was based upon here, and we've given them up in a pursuit for protection, but we've compromised our liberty, and we don't want to go that far. Also prove the effectiveness of this and that you desperately need all these unchecked powers. Sure. Public, by the way, is not so opposed to that position when you look at the numbers. Conversely, you see what's going on. You have open conversation that there could be significant ISIS terror cells. We'll debate what significant is, but a lot of potential terrorist sleeping cells in the country. And you got the Fed saying, A, we need better technology, but more than that, we need to be able to cross-reference encrypted messages, and we need more access to it. And that is, again, getting into people's private businesses without a ton of checks and balances. Where do you fall?
I fall, it really depends on the moment.
Because you're a libertarian in some things, right?
Ish, yeah, I'm one of those guys where it's like, I almost have capitulated to some extent, and I'm one of those guys that says, at the risk of being cliche, I've got nothing to hide. You can go through my emails. At the same time, At the same, well, I'm not saying I'm clean. It appears as driven snow. But but at the same time, I think a lot of people are that way. And yet at the same time, you look at what's going on in the news. The numbers are up. The terrorist activity is up in the United States. There has been, you forget, over the last 8 years or so, there's been a lot of foiled attempts and half attempts that were carried out. Everything from.
Let me pick up for that for you, Andrew. I know where you stand. We've talked about this many times. I'm going to give you a scenario. The Boston suspects in this were not foiled. And it turned out that they killed a law enforcement officer, and the feds can show empirically that they weren't able to cross-reference some of the information, and they weren't able to do the intercepts because they didn't have the wherewithal to do it. Would your opinion change at all that if we have the technology capable, and we do see that there's a viable threat, that limiting law enforcement against national self-interest?
You're saying that they don't have the wherewithal to tap the phones or to use. Yeah, get a warrant. And I'm sure if you present that information to a judge, any judge in the country, even Judge Judy, will give you a warrant to put the wiretaps down.
Andrew is exactly correct. The notion of not having enough resources, give them resources. But the big fight here is not about whether the government can listen into your phone calls. It can. It always has been able to. The question is, can it listen into your phone calls without a judicial warrant?
But here's the only issue, Richard. No, I listened to what Steinbach said. It wasn't as simple as they've identified Dom and they want to go after him, and now they got to go to Pfizer, they got to get a court. That's not the issue. They're saying right now, technology to break into encrypted thing, to find out who the threat is, you need an existing program that can cross-reference.
Two issues. A program that can cross-reference, good. Do it. but employ it when you get a warrant. We
But
use
you're
the
putting
warrant
the chicken
system.
before the egg, according to law enforcement, which is you'll never know he's a target if they don't have the program already
What
in
are the odds
place.
that law enforcement has a vested interest in this debate and wants to skew the parameters
That's
of the
a
debate
fair and a
to
cynical
benefit them?
perspective here.
Well-
but again, I started this from the premise, what if they didn't foil the attack? And what if it happened? And what if we learned later that we had the technology to identify this person and then get a warrant to execute a search of him or whatever else? But if the technology isn't in place, as I understand it, you're never going to identify him in the first place.
If you want to use that technology to investigate Mr. Jones, get a warrant.
Just
do
like
that-
crime
this-
fighting
this
through
is-
the decades,
this-
through the centuries. You know, in America, you've had to, you know, be it wiretapping, be it fingerprinting, you know, as technology has come through turns of the century, as long as it followed the Constitution, like hashtag Brodsky is saying. I agree. Get a warrant. Get a warrant.
This is
Stick to the Constitution.
This is the stop and frisk debate, just in a different parameter, in a different venue. You can eliminate every crime in New York City before it ever happens
But you
if
know
you
we're talking about
violate
online
everybody's
chat,
rights
right?
and make sure that nobody does anything violent
But you're
or
not
has a weapon
finding the
on.
guy lurking in the corner. This is online chatter. And I'm conflicted about this. So I'm playing devil's advocate, but I am saying to get the online chatter that connects the threading between you and the other person,
Why
the person
can't you get a
procuring it.
warrant?
Because you have to first identify that it's a threat. The chatter, if they can cross-reference,
They knew these
will
guys
identify
were
the
a
threat. Yes, in this case. And maybe bad cases, you would say barrister makes bad law. But the point is, what Steinbach was offering and arguing today was technologies involved, specifically with encrypted messages, that it's not enough that you know who the guy is. You got to intercept the chatter first to then determine he's
Get
a
a
threat.
warrant.
No one's listening.
Richard, I listened patiently to this argument.
First for everything, yes.
I love these guys. I love these guys, but they are dead wrong. They are dead wrong. TJ was headed in the right direction, but he backed off. Get a warrant sounds great. TV, all of that great stuff. It sounds fantastic. But I'm with law enforcement on this one. If you can't identify the guy, how are you going to get the warrant?
Okay.
And they got to act. They don't have time to sit back pleasing guys like this. They got to act and
Dominic
they got to
timed this
stop
perfectly
it.
because I got to order a break here. And Richard, you'll like the next topic, so trust me. There you go. You weigh in on this conversation. It will be the debate here, I think, certainly for our generation, if not our kids. Go over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on this balance between privacy and protection, security versus privacy. Is it worth increasing government surveillance powers if they infringe on your privacy? All right, coming up next. If your name's Hillary or Bernie, I got some good news for you. Turns out, not by a little bit, but the vast majority of Americans agree with them on a signature issue when it comes to income inequality, and you got to see these numbers to believe it.